Hey guys, welcome to the secret history living inside your aquarium. Today we're not talking too much history, we're just talking about how to set up a nice shrimp tank. So, what I like to do when I'm setting up a new shrimp tank, I have two methods. So the first method is for Neocaridina, and we're going to discuss that real quick. But basically what you want is you want a tank, if you're breeding shrimp, where you can see the shrimp for the most part, and to find the ones that are hiding, you want to give them some hiding spots. And I like planted tanks because they keep the ecology and the biology of everything more healthy, stable. They give you more buffer for ammonia if plants are dying, or if, whatever, a fish dies, if you're trying to keep killifish or something with them. Ideally, you don't want to keep fish with shrimp, in that the baby shrimp will get eaten. But it's not impossible too. And so in one of my older videos, I talk about rock piles, but this is a good example. So I just prepared this tank last night. I pulled out lots of extra big gravel, or medium gravel, I should say, as well as sand that was in here. And so right now we have a little endler breeding project that I have, but I have shrimp coming in next week. And I want to reestablish this tank as a primarily shrimp tank, if not all shrimp tank. And basically, this tank here, you can see that making a rock hide, I think, is essential to a nursery, especially if you're going to have any fish in there. Currently, I've got a crib in here, and then we've got some killifish back in there, as well as endlers. Now, endlers will definitely eat baby shrimp. Killifish tend to hang out more towards the top and don't have such a voracious appetite, these clown killies. And I've had good luck with these clown killies kind of just hanging out towards the top, as long as you give them some duckweed or some water lettuce or salvinia. Any of those things works out well. Obviously, I'm going to take these other fish out once I get it, but I like to use a tank that has the oldest tank you got. 10 gallon is okay, 20 gallons better, but for me, I want to use 10 gallons because of the space I have. I like to use a hang off the back filter just to give a little bit of water flow, even if it's at a trickle, but it just kind of moves things around. And then I use the big sponges on the intake as sort of one of these. So this is the first setup, and I think it's important. So for Neocaridina in this setup, I've added a little bit of Fluval, low buffering stratum, and so this soil here should help keep down the pH level. And most shrimp like either neutral or 6 or somewhere in there is ideal. Cherry shrimp, I've had them all the way to 8.5, but ideally you want to keep the pH a little lower, the temperature a teeny bit lower. The higher the temperature, if you're up in the 78, 80 range, they'll still survive, but their life cycle goes much quicker, and they end up growing quicker, but also dying faster. And so if you have a star breeder that you're trying to have and keep breeding from, then you definitely blow through their life cycle a lot quicker. So I recommend keeping it around 74, 75 degrees, and some people keep it as low as like 72. But for Neocaridina shrimp, this is my favorite setup. I put some plants in randomly. They'll eat algae and aufux, which are colonies of biofilm, the sticky or greasy, slimy stuff you feel on surfaces. That stuff is a combination of algae, protozoa, bacteria, sometimes fungi, and that stuff is great. Like right in here, I cleaned a lot of the glass here on the outside. You can see there's some water stains on the outside. But on the inside, I've allowed certain algae and things to stay, especially on the side glass, because the shrimp will definitely, that's kind of like a grazing ground. If you have a rock that's really gnarly, like something like this up here that has algae all over it from another setup, those are great. Also, instead of a hang off the back feel free to use, these are kind of the gold standard, either Madden filters that go in the edge or in the corner that are like a sponge that just kind of runs some water through it and allows beneficial bacteria to grow, like a biofilter. But I do like a little bit of filtering from other means too. Now, in this tank down here, it's kind of part gravel, part fluval, and that will keep my pH right around 6.5 or so, which is great for Neocaridina. And then also I have a tank for oddball shrimp that have been hanging out in there. These ones have literally been in there 5 months, 4 months, some of them. And they're in with some snails that are just like not fitting the color motif of different tanks and when I'm trying to selectively breed. So I keep a stack of these boxes, and usually I leave them there for a shorter time than that, but I did an experiment with some of the wild type shrimp just to see how long they would do well in there. And as long as you leave them good grazing bacterial rich and stuff that has slime coat biofilm growing on it, they can do just fine as long as there's a grate with water coming in and out, fresh water coming in and out. And it helps to have a snail or two in there because that then eats the excess waste that is in there. But if you notice they're totally out competing the shrimp, then X-nay on the snails. But when you make a rock pile or use cholla wood, it's basically places for the baby shrimp to hide as well as the mothers. So when they get pregnant, they will hide, and they want rock warrens or dens. So I start with small pebbles. So this whole thing down to the bottom of the glass almost is teeny rocks like this big. And then it gets to rocks this big. And then on top of those, I place bigger, flatter rocks so that if a fish tries to chase them in, they might get into that first cave, but then there's 2 more caves usually, or, you know, there's different ways. There's something floating out of there right now. Oh, it's a little shrimp. So that's just one way. I have a whole video on that. And then I like to always keep Cataupa leaves in the tank. So that is my ideal shrimp setup. 20 gallons would be ideal, but 10 works just fine. I've bred hundreds of shrimp in that setup and made profit from it. So the next setup is going to be this kind up here. Let me turn the light on for y'all. And this type of setup is for Caridina shrimp. If I can find the light. Let there be light. Come on. I hope there's let there be light. Alright. Ta-da! Okay. So, in this setup here, pardon the glare from the windows, but in this setup here, I have these really cheap filters you can get on Amazon. And they're great. They just work with an airline. You can run, I mean, I'm running this one and this one and this one all off of one airline. That's just a little cheapo one. And it seems to work just fine. It doesn't need the full flow. Sometimes the full flow can be a bit much. With shrimp, this also keeps the water top, the surface level agitation, breaks up the proteins and things. This is an 8-gallon tank. It's like, well, 7 point something. And it's considered a bookshelf tank. So it's skinny. It's like 8 inches by, I don't know, 20 inches. And this is all Brightwell volcanic clay earth soil. And then I've left a rock that is very heavy in aufux, or beneficial bacteria, colonies of stuff like that. And then there's a couple snails in here, but for the most part right now there are no shrimp in here. This is just getting ready for Caridina shrimp that are incoming from Flip Aquatics. So you want something that buffers the substrate, that doesn't have ammonia or nitrate. If it does have ammonia or nitrate, like ADA soils and things, then I would make sure that it's months and months old. Make sure that it's very free of those. Right now I have another set of clown killifish in here, 2 females and a male. And I also have lots of floating hornweed and other plants in here, more Cataupa leaves. And I don't really gravel vac this at all. The other one below I can gravel vac, but this one I keep a little cooler. It's probably running at like 75 ideally. Let's see if we can get a focus on that. Well, it's a little warm right now, just the house is a little warmer, but yeah, it usually runs around 70, somewhere between 72 and 76. Ideally, you want to keep your shrimp temperatures pretty constant. I mean, at night there's fluctuation in the wild, but what I have set up is in between shrimp coming and going, I like to put killifish in because they'll lay eggs, and then while there's no shrimp in there for a week or two, you can oftentimes get killi eggs to hatch, and they're so small that shrimp, snails, other killifish, all sorts of things eat them. So I'll leave the killifish in there for 2 weeks, take them out, put them back in with Gen Pop, as I like to call it. This tank is full of all sorts of critters. There's all my Japanese blues and things. But I wanted to take note that in Seattle, we have a TDS that is very, very low. If you've seen my videos in the past, you know that. And we can get it as low as like 15 out of the tap sometimes. And so I just wanted to show you that, well, I was going to hopefully find one to show you. But there are 3 crystal, oh, here's one. There are 3 crystal shrimp living amongst all these other fish. And that's just fine as long as none of your fish, as long as it doesn't fit in the mouth of your fish, that's totally fine. However, ideally, if you want them to reproduce, here's another one back in there, and they've been in there for about a month now. And ideally, if you want them to reproduce, you're not going to want that. But as you can see, I didn't buffer the soil. So if you have RO water or well water that has a really low or really neutral to low pH and then low TDS, total dissolved solids, you can put your shrimp in a tank like this. The ideal tank is something more like this. If you're talking Taiwan bees, Caridinas, things like that, I'm going to take these guys out just because every baby shrimp counts. I don't want them eaten when I have crystals or something like that up there. So that's kind of the story here. So these shrimp, they may very well get pregnant, but most likely their babies will get eaten by the fish and things unless they have a really good hiding spot, which you can also provide. You can make, like in this coconut, I could fill it with like medium-sized rocks and then put something else there, but these shrimp like to move around. They're not afraid of the fish or anything right now. The biggest fish I have in here are probably female guppies and some cory cats that are full grown. But just, you don't want anything super aggressive. Sometimes larger tetras, rummy nose, lemon tetras, things like that, or rainbow sharks. Like, I don't know why you'd put them in with shrimp, but things like that, Siamese algae eaters that are bigger can mess with shrimp in theory. But that being said, let me take you upstairs real quick, and I'll show you the last setup of Neocaridina shrimp that I have. And what I like to do, that bottom tank will be a nursery tank. And this is controversial. A lot of people don't like this. I'll also be keeping shrimp in here, but this is ADA aqua soil, and this needs to completely off gas and let go of the ammonia before I put anything in there. So here's the next setup of shrimp. And so that nursery tank that I showed you downstairs, the bottom tank, these shrimp frequently get pregnant, but rarely do I see baby shrimp coming out of them, even though there's probably 60 in this tank at least. And this is a 40-gallon tank, and I just ate my own words in that there are Siamese algae eaters and things, but there's also lots of caves, and these are big caves, as well as lava rock and just really dense plant matter. And they seem to hang out wherever once they're full grown, and seem to be able to navigate and move around just fine. So you can keep them in an open tank just like this. I mean, that's an option. The last, tied with that, in here I have malawa shrimp and blue shrimp. And the reason I'm showing you all these, so here's a malawa shrimp that's dark right now. They also turn very clear. And then I have blue shrimp somewhere in here. You know, they're probably hanging out down below. But I give them lots of ground cover. And in this tank, which is all CPDs with a few endlers and all little danio type fish, we have a much higher success rate in keeping baby shrimp just because this is so packed. Notice the soil is not buffered, so that's kind of an interesting point or a thing to point out. But the shrimp, once they're adults, seem to go out and about, find each other and mate. And what I will do, there's another one back over there, that's a blue dream. What I will do is I will pull them from these tanks when I see that they are pregnant, and to give them a fighting chance. And here's the other malawa shrimp that looks like Gonzo. He's got white eyeballs and a long nose. Let's see if we can get a better shot of him. They're kind of funny looking, but they clean just as good as an amono, but they're much smaller. I would say anyways, that they clean just as good. Sorry about the algae on here. Part of this is I need to clean the front glass, but I like to leave algae in the back because I've got 2 plecos and some snails. We've got some golden snails in here, some golden, blood red golden ram's horns, and a couple neorites. And so I like to leave them in here. But the shrimp will turn color. There we go. There's the Gonzo face right there. Gonzo shrimp. And then up here, that's the same species in its dark morph. And they're a little harder to tell if they're pregnant, but they get pregnant way easier than all the other species. And they're a Malay shrimp, as you may guess with the Malawa name, or Malawa, however you want to say it. But this tank, so I'll pull the pregnant females out, I'll put them in the nursery. I don't allow adult males in the nursery, and then in the nursery, I wait until they give birth. I pull the adults out, put them back into their respective tanks. Blue, red, yellow is what this tank will be, and then we'll have a green tank again, or a really tank. I've noticed you can get away with putting oranges and reds together, and they will intermix and screw up the DNA a little bit, but the thing is, an orange usually reverts to a red, or a red will turn a light orange color when they mix, rather than going completely wild right away. But over time, any mixing of shrimp from different strains that aren't established, you usually will get wild ones, and you have to cull them. So that's when you have to decide, are you okay with having a tank like this where it's really hard to cull and pull out the shrimp that you don't want, sell them, give them away, put them in another tank that don't have the color and traits you want, like these tanks? Or do you want a nursery style setup, or just keep all your shrimp in the tank away from fish like the tanks downstairs? For me, I like to have the shrimp with the fish, and once I catch that they're pregnant, I'll try to catch them out and bring them downstairs, where they have a success rate of 15 to 20 shrimp usually per litter. And that is my kind of controversial way, where I'll have blues and reds right next to each other, because they don't come to sexual maturity until 3 to 6 months, more likely 5 or 6 months in most cases. So around 2 months, if you have a tank that's very easy to scour the whole thing and look for them, maybe 1 or 2 get away, but you can tell that if anyone got pregnant in that tank, it's very clear with saddles. You see them starting to saddle, and then you see the eggs come out and on their belly. So you can catch that early if you're very, very attentive. But it is asking for trouble if you're not, if you're trying to do any sort of very in-depth line breeding. That is not the right, correct, official way to do it. Also, the other thing I like to mention is I like to keep biomedia and things like that, bio rings or just logs and rocks that are ready to go, and I'll put them back into the shrimp tanks downstairs, so that 1, it helps the water with beneficial bacteria and tannins, and 2, it gives them something to graze on. Once they've cleaned it up, then I'll throw it back in the big tank and the cycle starts again. So I hope some of this information helped you guys. I hope this clarifies, again, my nursery system of how I have adult shrimp of different colors, Neocaridina, and then usually Caridina of some sort with them also. And then I will switch them out as they become pregnant and put them in the tank. And then I just don't allow males of low quality, period. Whenever I see one, I pull it out of these tanks, and I don't put it in the tank if it doesn't look good from the nursery. I sell it to the pet store for a cheap price, like 50 cents or $1 or whatever. So that's a good way you can do it, or you can give them away, or you can just let them go wild. Like all these blues, if we give them another rock pile and the malawas, they will eventually populate the tank, probably. Although these small nanofish are actual predator hunters. They're hunters, so sometimes you're better off with even a little bit bigger of a fish or a little smaller like a neon tetra or killifish or something like that that hang out up top, because the instinct of these guys is to go down through the bushes and hunt. And so they go down low and work their way through looking for baby shrimp and stuff frequently. So they need good hiding spots. Like back in here, well, you can't see it because of the light, but there's good cracks and crevices in this that have more pebbles in between and plants. So I hope this helped you guys. I hope you learned a little something and you're having a good time with your shrimp, getting into it. If you have any questions, drop me a line. If you like this, please like, subscribe, click the little bell if you want to see future stuff. And a couple times a week, usually I do live chats. So if you have questions about your shrimp, let me know. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Take care of yourself and your critters. And don't forget to swim on, no matter what comes at you in life. All right, guys, take care.